as I have mentioned in my earlier video that we are going to start 6th standard history book named Our Past First. So today I have started the first chapter. The name of the first chapter is What, Where, How and When. So before starting chapter, as you can see a orange box on the screen, and you would able to see it on various pages of the textbook. So I'd like to inform you all that all the orange boxes in the textbook or various color boxes consist of hints, consist of questions that give you hint about the topic, or it may help you to understand the topic from various angles. So we will start the chapter. Rashida's question. Rashida sat reading the newspaper. Suddenly her eyes fell on a small headline. 100 years ago. How, she wondered, could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? So as given in the box, that Rashida was once reading a newspaper, and then she saw a headline named 100 years ago. And by seeing the headline, one question arose in her mind, that how could people know about so many years ago, that how people know what happened 100 years ago, 1000 years ago. So this was the question in Rashida's mind. Next point, finding out what happened. Yesterday you could listen to the radio, watch television, read a newspaper. Last year, ask somebody who remembers. But what about long, long ago? Let us see how it can be done. So in this, that the writer asks that if anyone asks anyone about yesterday, then we would be able to tell that what we have done yesterday. We might able to tell what we have done last year, but can we tell about 10 years ago, 100 years ago? So how it can be done is to be studied in the next paragraph. So next point is, what can we know about the past? So from history, which types of things we can know about the past? There are several things we can find out. What people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, crafts, persons, artists, musicians, and scientists. So they have mentioned various things that which we can find out about the past. So what people ate, so which kind of food people used to eat in those times, that today we eat junk food, but was it prevalent in those times? We would again able to understand which kind of clothes people wore in those times, in which houses they lived. Like there was no bricks, no cements in that times, so they used to live in the houses or tents made by bamboos, mud. So we'll understand about different types of that. We would also able to learn about the lives of hunters, the people who hunt animals, herders, farmers, how the farming was done in that types, how rulers used to administer, how they used to help people. Merchants, we would learn about the lives of merchants, how the trade was taken place in those times. We would learn about various types of craft persons, artists, musicians, and also scientists, what kind of inventions the people used to made in those time. We would also find about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, the songs they sang. So it also know about the life of children, how children used to live in those times, which games they used to play, which stories they have heard, what was their pastime, which songs they used to sing. So all of these things mentioned in the paragraph are some things which we can learn from the past. So when we learn the past, we'll know about all these types of things. So where did people live? People have lived along the banks of this river for several hundred thousand years. So in ancient times, the people used to live on the bank of river. There were not settlements, houses. So people used to settle on the banks of the river. Uh, some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers. So some of the earliest people who lived thousands of years ago on the banks were known as skilled gatherers. So you can see in black on the other side of the image that skill gatherers. The meaning of skilled gatherers is the people who gather their food. So the people who gather their food from forest, from various type parts of the land, they are known as skilled gatherers. They knew about the vast health of plants in the surrounding forest and collected roots, fruits, and other forest produce for their food. So, as they used to gather their food from the forest, so they knew about the wealth of plants in the forest, what was the types of fruits, which fruits were available, and other forest produce for their food. So, all that information about the plants, the fruits, the roots, minerals were known by these skilled gatherers, and they also used to hunted animals. By hunting animals, they used to eat their flesh. So the skill gatherers were the people who know about various types of plants, nutrients in the forest, and they also used to hunt animals. So as you can see, there are various pink lines in the images about the rivers. So I will make a special video on map in which I will give every in which I will show you the location of every river and whichever places are mentioned in the pink ink. Some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. So, the areas where women and men first started farming and started to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located around Suleiman and Kirtar hills. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle and started to live in villages. So, in the times of 8,000 years ago, people also started rearing animals, domestic animals like sheep, goat, and cattle, and they started to live in the villages. By the time villages also came into existence, there were some of the other areas where agriculture developed. So, not only in Suleiman and Kirtar Hills was the agriculture started, but agriculture developed all over the country. People started to do farming in various parts of the country. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. So the place where the crop rice was grown for the first time is to the north of the Vindhya ranges. So in this we understand that men and women who started to grow crops such as wheat and barley for first time about 8,000 years ago were in the regions of Suleiman and Kirtar hills, and the place where rice crop was grown for the first time is to the north of the Vindhya ranges. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of this river. So, about 4,700 years ago, the earliest cities flourished on the banks of the river Indus. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of the Ganga and its tributaries and along the seacoast. So, about 2,500 years ago, the cities also developed on the coast of river Ganga and its tributaries, and new cities also started to develop along the sea coast. The information you can see about the map would be taught in a separate video, so that would be easy for you to understand. In ancient times, the area along this river to the south of Ganga was known as Magad, now lying in the state of Bihar. So in ancient times, the region to the south of Ganga river was known as Magad, which now lies in the state of Bihar. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the countries well. So Magad was a powerful and large kingdom during those times. Its rulers were very powerful, and they have also set up their kingdom in other parts of the country as well. Throughout, people travel from one part of the subcontinent to another. So the people after this period started to travel from one part of the country to another in search of food, in search of the settlements to live, in search of forests to do farming. The hills and high mountains, including Himalayas, desert, rivers, and seas, made journeys dangerous at times but never impossible. The hills, the high mountains like Himalayas, various types of deserts, rivers, and seas in the route made the journey difficult for the people, but it was not impossible, and people continued to journey, and by passing through all of these difficulties, they used to complete their journey. So men and women moved in search of livelihood as also to escape from natural disasters like floods or droughts. So the movement of people from one part of subcontinent to another was due to search of livelihood, search of food, and they wanted to escape from natural disasters like floods or droughts. So the people started to move from one place to another by facing several difficulties in the search of livelihood and food, and because they also wanted to escape from natural disasters like floods or droughts. Sometimes men and ships started to carry valuable goods from place to place. So as we seen that people started to travel, so they also started to carry the valuable goods from one place to another along with them. Religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instruction and advice on the way. So the religious teachers and spiritual teachers also started to travel from one place to another along with the people to spread their religions, to spread their spiritual thinking, to offer instructions and advice to the people who were traveling. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. So, as we have seen earlier, that people started to travel in search of livelihood, but in this period, finally, people started to travel by a spirit of adventure. They travel to discover something new and exciting places. So, all this movement of people from one place to another led to the sharing of ideas between the people. Why do people travel nowadays? Hills, mountains, and seas form the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. So, the hills, mountains, and seas around the subcontinent forms the natural frontiers. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale the mountains and cross the seas. So it is difficult to cross the frontiers, but those who wanted, they did cross the seas and entered India. So people from across the frontiers who wanted came into the subcontinent and settled here. So people from across the frontiers came and settled into the subcontinent and started to live here. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. So these movements to India of people from various parts of the world increased our cultural traditions and enriched our heritage. People have shared new way of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundreds of years. So as we know that people started to share information about various kinds, so people have shared information about the new ways of carving stone, about the new ways, new techniques of composing music, and which food we used to cook over several hundred years of ago. The next point, names of the land. Two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. So the two words we mostly use to name our country are India and Bharat. So we will now study about the origin of this word. The word India comes from the river Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. The Iranians and the Greeks who came throughout the northwest about 2500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus called it the Hindus or the Indos, and land to the east of the river was called India. So the word India comes from the river named Indus. Indus was called Sindhu in Sanskrit. So the people from Iran and Greek who came to India from northwest about 2500 years ago, they were familiar with the river Indus and they used to call it Hindus or Indos. So this Iranian and Greek people started to call the land to the east of the river as India. So the name India was derived from this. Second, the name Bharata was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in Rig Veda, the earliest composition in the Sanskrit. So the name Bharata. So the name Bharata earlier was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest, and it is mentioned in the Rig Veda, which is the earliest composition in Sanskrit. Later it was used for the country. So the word Bharata earlier was used to describe a group of people living in northwest, but later it was started to use to name the country. So we will study the remaining part of the chapter in the next video. So please tell us how you liked our video and our way of teaching. So if you want any changes, you can suggest it. So please give your suggestions in the comment section below so that it can help us and we can understand the improvements that we need to make. So please suggest the changes that you want to see, and please tell us how was our way of teaching. So if you have liked the video, so please do like and share the video as much as you can, and please subscribe to our channel for such more videos. Thank you for watching the video.